One of the commentators on Salem News wanted to know how Jews feel about the recent riots against Jews. The anti-Jewish poem, "Palestine will be free from the river to the sea," means just what it says. They want to clean out all the Jews from the river to the sea. Yeah, I know some of them have made lip service for the Jews that are originally there prior to 1920. That's only lip service. The Arabs attacked those Jews. Before then, they attacked them, they killed them. Anyone who knows a little bit about Jewish history under the Ottoman Empire, knows how sad it was to be a Jew. It was better than certain places in Europe, because those places in Europe were much harsher. The church controlled it, and they expelled the Jews because the Jews refused to accept Christianity. We also refused to accept Islam. And we were doing it for a long time. And we were abused, beaten. Some instances of women were raped, children stolen, murdered, pogroms happening every so often. The whole history of events from the destruction of the temple until the resurgence of Jewish identity blossoming in the return of Jewish dominion over the land, some of the land of Israel. That period of 1900 years is one of the saddest periods of any people in the world. I'm not going to diminish the Armenian genocide. I'm not going to diminish any of the other genocides that we've seen in the world, in the Tutsis and the Hutus, and different tribes in different areas in Southeast Asia. But for us Jews, who are among the oldest peoples in the world, we only have about 13 to 16 million survivors. For us, those last 2,000 years of tears and frustration because we couldn't do anything about it. I'm not saying that the fact that we have the land of Israel is an end to our tzaras, an end to our suffering. It's not an end. The presence of Israel has brought about incredible hate from the surrounding Arabs. But those of us in the West who have tasted of Western freedoms do not want to go back to the old days of dhimmihood. Being a dhimmi is the equivalent of the N-word. It's even worse than the N-word. Couldn't ride a donkey through the middle of the street if there were Arabs riding a donkey. Muslims riding donkeys. You couldn't walk in the middle of the street. You had to walk on the side of the street. We were subjected to all kinds of abuse, verbal, physical, financial, and then abuse of our own lives. So those of us who have tasted freedom in the Western world, we aren't going back to dhimmihood. And that is a capital crime in the eyes of in Muslims. The Muslims insist that Jews have to be dhimmis. If they're unwilling to accept Islam, then they have to be dhimmis. They have to pay a tax for their lives. And we Jews have tasted freedoms in the Western world. We aren't going back to that status of dhimmihood. The blacks in America are not going back to the end condition. They're not going to do that. They've tasted freedom. And they don't want to go back. And they're unwilling to go back. And they will fight not to go back. So any active push by the Arabs to get Jews to accept the original status is pie in the sky. It's not even pie in the sky. It's ridiculous. And therefore, the words of the Hadith, for those who don't know, that's the oral law or the oral tradition of Islam, has in its conversations that there will come a day of Al-Aqsa. It sounds very familiar. The mosque on top of our Temple Mount is called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. What is the day of Al-Aqsa, you ask? It's the day that they will go out and murder all the Jews in Jerusalem. And every tree will say to the Arabs, behind me there's a Jew hiding, go and kill him. You hear that? The trees will identify where the Jews are hiding. And they will kill every last one of the Jews. And for you Sunday folks, don't be so smug. They say clearly after the Saturday people, they'll get to the Sunday people. This is their belief. Horrific as it is, that's their belief. And unless you accept dhimmihood, second-class citizenship, as far as I know, no one in the great Satan country of the United States will accept being a second-class citizen. The whites, mostly whites, the blacks also fought in the Revolutionary War. Those who fought the Revolutionary War for freedom is not going back to become a subject under some other people. So, what is the way going forward? I've said this before on one of my previous videos. And I say this again to my Muslim brothers, and I consider them brothers. Those who are honorable men, those who bear no evil will for anyone, and I don't want to see anyone hurt. I don't delight in the death of others. As despicable as people they can be, I would rather God dealt with them, not me, or not my brothers. So I say to my Muslim brothers, it's time for a change. I know you can't do this on your own. It would require great thinkers, great theologians. But as I've pointed out in some of my videos, often when the Quran quotes a verse in the Torah or an idea in the Torah, it has not just one, but numerous errors, numerous clear errors of context, content, if I were to be someone who believes in the divinity of the person authoring the Quran, I'd be troubled by this. And I know that many so-called scholars poo-poo this and just say that the Jews changed their text out of hatred for the Quran. I've answered this before, but the answer is obvious. Our Torah has been around for over 2,000 years before Muhammad came along. There already existed a Greek translation of the Torah 1,000 years before Muhammad was born. Or close to that, close to 1,000 years. And 200 years before Muhammad was born, or 200 plus, maybe 240 years, whatever, the Romans had their own translation made into Latin called the Vulgate. Those translations prove the correctness of the Hebrew version, the Jewish version. So we did not change the context. We didn't change the identities of who was offered on Mount Moriah. We did not change who was supposed to be the heir of Ibrahim. We didn't change that at all. The one who suggests that it was changed was Muhammad. No one else before, certainly. After them, those who believe in Muhammad believe that. So what are you supposed to say about the evidence that this is false? So you'll have to create the idea that universal truths or spiritual truths exist independent of the verses. And not everything has to be taken exactly in its literal context. It can be taken in its spiritual context more than in its literal context. And therefore, what you will say will be more like, the Jews had their chance, they flubbed it, and now I'm giving a chance to Yishmael. That would be the simple answer. You don't need to go ahead and change the books. And if in the Quran it indicates a change to the books, that means it's not meant to be taken literally. It means figuratively. That your message is that God rewarded the Ishmaelites for their fidelity, punished the non-Ishmaelites for their recalcitrance. But the words of the Bible and the words of the Quran are not meant to be taken exactly as stated. Then, if you did that, if you looked coldly, accurately, at what it was said and what wasn't said, and made a conclusion that was favorable to yourself based upon ideology or principle, you could then also take out of literal discussion and create a spiritual reality for it, for what you call jihad. That the jihad against the Jew and the day of Al-Aqsa is not meant to be a physical confrontation with murder or genocide as its conclusion, but rather an argument that you will have with other peoples, that you say you win. Let the argument begin now. I'm ready. And in the meantime, let's stop the killing in the name of God. Let's start the healing in the name of God. Let's start the cures in the name of God. Let's start the compassion in the name of God, instead of death in the name of God.